The fire burned low in the crypt, barely more than a flicker struggling in the stale air. Outside, ash fell like snow through the crumbled ruins. The world slept in silence, if only because nothing living dared make a sound. Below, in the hush of shadow and stone, Elaria and Veyron sat across from one another, their features calm, but their eyes old and worn. They hadn't spoken in an hour. When Elaria finally broke the silence, her voice was like wind through cracked glass. "Do you know how many of our kind are still alive?" Veyron stared into the flame, its light dancing along his pale face. He didn't answer immediately. "Too few," he said at last, "and most of the powerful are gone." Elaria nodded slowly. "I've crossed 3 continents. I've walked through the bones of cities. I've seen nothing but scavengers. Some of them feral, most broken. They drink what they can, from whoever they can, and move on. They've lost what made us. Us." She folded her hands in her lap. "They cannot be trusted." Veyron exhaled through his nose. "I agree." She studied his face for a long moment. "Can you sense them?" He looked up. "I can," he said carefully. "Faint echoes. A flicker here, a scent there, but I dare not reach out. I don't know who they are, not anymore. Some of our bloodline aren't intelligent enough to understand restraint." Elaria raised an eyebrow. "They would kill the humans?" she asked. "Kill, feed, move on." He nodded. "They wouldn't see Kayla, Jonas, or Mira as potential, only as prey." The shadows in the room seemed to stretch as he spoke. "I can sense them, yes," Veyron continued, "but I won't probe, not deeply, not with intent. If I do, they'll sense me, and some of them may come looking." Elaria's face hardened. "And you're not ready for that." Veyron gave a faint, dry smile. "None of us are." A moment passed between them, heavy with memory. Then he said, softly, "Tell me, sister, do you still believe in the prophecy?" She didn't answer at first. Her gaze dropped to the stone floor, then rose again, filled with something old and bitter. "That was a story," she said, "told to fledglings to make them feel safe when the dark closed in." Veyron's eyes glinted. "You used to believe it." "I used to believe a lot of things," she replied. "That our kind would endure, that the blood would always guide us, that no matter what horrors emerged from the dark, we would adapt, survive, rule." She looked at him now directly. There was no softness in her expression. "We are doomed, Veyron. This world is no longer ours. The throne belongs to monsters, and we are shadows, fading into myth." Veyron nodded slowly. "Maybe," he said, "but even a fading shadow can still hide a fire." Elaria didn't reply, but for the first time since she arrived, she looked uncertain. Mira leaned against the cold stone wall, arms crossed, watching the candle burn low. Across from her, Elaria stood tall, elegant, even in stillness, her long cloak draped like smoke. She studied Mira with those ancient, piercing eyes, half curious, half calculating. "You said you knew of another place?" Mira asked, breaking the silence. "Somewhere safe?" Elaria smiled faintly. "Safer, dear. There is no such thing as safe anymore." Mira frowned. "Fair." "I passed it months ago," Elaria continued. "An old farmhouse, miles from anything, falling apart, rotting in the wind, but beneath it, hidden under the boards and the bones, was a bunker, reinforced, locked. Someone's laboratory, perhaps, or a fallout shelter from another era. She tilted her head. I didn't investigate fully, but it reeked of forgotten purpose. Mira was quiet for a moment, processing. Elaria stepped closer, her tone softening. So tell me, dear, how did you survive all this? Mira gave a hollow laugh. I don't know. One day at a time, I guess. Just moving, eating, hiding, trying not to scream when it got too quiet. Elaria's gaze deepened. How about your family? Mira's voice dipped, more guarded now. My mum, she passed before all this. She had Alzheimer's. Wasn't really there by the end. She swallowed. My dad, he was brilliant, a scientist, spoke in formulas more than words. But when she died, something broke in him. He stopped talking, stopped trying. He just faded. I'm sorry, Elaria said quietly. Mira shrugged, like it hurt less if she pretended it didn't matter. It was a long time ago. I've been on my own since the world started falling apart. Elaria stepped closer, lowering her voice. Hope is the only thing that keeps us going, even when we don't realise it's there. You've survived this long not because of luck, but because something inside you refuses to break. Mira looked down. I'm no one, just getting through. Elaria leaned in slightly, voice silk and shadow. I sense something in you, something powerful. Maybe not yet, but it's there. Flickering. Mira met her gaze, unsure how to respond. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed from the tunnel beyond. Kayla's voice called out. Sun's coming up. If we're going to get supplies, now's the time. Jonas appeared behind her, checking his gear. We're low on water and food. Again. Mira pushed off the wall, shaking the weight of the conversation from her shoulders. Then let's move. Elaria watched her go, silent. Veyron appeared in the doorway behind them, arms crossed. Quite the little army we're assembling, he said dryly. Elaria didn't look at him. She's stronger than she knows. Veyron smirked. They always are, until the world shows them why. The sun hung low in the sky, bleeding orange through the ash haze. What little warmth it gave was devoured by the cold silence of the ruins. Mira, Kayla, and Jonas moved quietly through the skeleton of a once thriving district. Abandoned homes, burned out storefronts, rusted cars blanketed in dust. The city was dead, and its corpse offered no comfort. They searched everything. Every alley, every collapsed building, every dark crevice that might once have held food, water, fuel, hope. Nothing. Empty shelves, smashed tins, rot and bones. The day dragged on and the silence became heavier. By the time the sky began to fade into that sickly purple dusk, Mira sat down hard on a stone block, staring at the crumbled husk of a convenience store. There's nothing left, she muttered. Jonas kicked a broken sign aside, shaking his head. This place is useless. We're scraping bones and hoping for miracles. We need to move on. Yeah, Kayla agreed, adjusting her torn jacket. We can't live like this. If we don't move soon, we're going to end up just like the last group. Mira wiped the sweat from her forehead. Her mind drifted for a moment, then remembered Elaria's words. There's a place, she said quietly. They looked at her. Mira stood, brushing the dust off her pants. Elaria told me about an old farmhouse. It's far isolated, but under it, There's a bunker. Reinforced, secure, hidden. Kayla's eyes widened, hopeful. That would be amazing. Something off-grid, away from all this. Jonas frowned. Elaria, he said carefully. One of the elders. Mira nodded. Yes. He looked between her and Kayla. And you trust them? Her? Veyron. You really think they care about us? He gestured around them. Because a few years ago, they'd be feeding on us without second thought. Mira didn't flinch. She stepped toward him, calm but firm. They're not who they were, or maybe they are, but they've changed, just like we've changed, just like this world has. Jonah started to speak, but she cut him off. They saved us when the lichens were at our backs, when we were bleeding, hopeless, hunted. They stood between us and death. They didn't need to, but they did. Her voice grew stronger, steadier. They helped us survive. They kept us alive. They gave us time to breathe. And right now, that's more than anyone else in this world has given. Jonas lowered his gaze, silent. Mira looked between the two of them. Her tone softened. I don't know what's next, but I know this. We don't make it without them. And for the first time in a long time, I actually believe we can make it. Kayla stared at her, impressed. Even Jonas didn't argue. Something in Mira had shifted. She didn't look like the girl just trying to get through the day anymore. She looked like someone willing to lead, even if just for a moment something flickered behind her eyes. Not just survival, not just anger, something like fire, a purpose beginning to burn. The sun was falling fast now, bleeding orange into the ash-grey sky. Mira, Kayla and Jonas were moving quickly, heading back toward the chapel crypt before the last light was gone. They'd scavenged nothing, the day nearly wasted, until Jonas spotted something jutting out of the tree line to the east. Fencing, barbed wire, metal gates. A crumbling sign, mostly rust. US Military Research Facility. Biohazard authorized personnel only. What the hell? Kayla murmured. Jonas shrugged. Guess we're not the first ones to come this way. The gates were hanging off their hinges, the road cracked and overgrown. Nature had started reclaiming the complex, but not fast enough to erase what had happened there. Inside, they found the ruins of a once high-security structure, broken walls, collapsed ceilings, equipment ripped apart or rusted through, computer terminals smashed, glass cases shattered. It looked like someone, or something, wanted this place erased. Whatever this was, it's gone now, Jonas muttered, kicking aside a melted keypad. They moved through what was once a sterilized hallway, past rows of shattered lab rooms, until Mira stopped suddenly. Wait, she whispered. She pointed to a wide cylindrical tank, its thick glass smashed inward, shards glittering on the floor. The metallic base hummed faintly, barely alive, as if it still remembered power. It was large enough to hold a human. Something was in here, Mira said softly. Something unfinished. Kayla stepped closer, her face pale. Do you think this is where they were working on a cure? Mira looked at the shredded remains of lab coats on the ground, blood dried on shattered instruments, burn marks on the wall. Maybe, but whatever it was, it didn't end well. They searched the room carefully, but most of it was useless. Burned, torn, stripped, until Jonas called out, "Here!" In a broken filing cabinet, beneath a scorched binder, they found the remains of a black folder. The pages were mostly missing or torn, the few that remained fragile with time and moisture, but one sheet stood out, partially intact, scrawled with notes and diagrams. At the top, faded but visible, Project Lichen Cure, Phase 2A. Subject Viability, Virus-based transmission reversal, Recombinant antibody stability, incomplete. Pages missing. Further development halted due to breach. Mira's hand trembled slightly as she turned the page, but the rest was gone. "Let's take this," Jonah said quietly. "Whatever it is, it's something." They returned just as the sun vanished. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the first howls echoed from far-off hills. The crypt doors closed behind them with a heavy finality. Veyron and Elaria were already waiting, seated like statues beneath flickering candlelight. The shadows seemed to stir behind them as Mira stepped forward and handed Veyron the tattered file. "We found this," she said, "at an old military facility. Nothing left but dust and rubble, but this was buried in the wreckage." Veyron opened the folder, eyes flicking across the contents. Elaria stepped beside him, silent, scanning the few legible words. "A cure," Veyron whispered. Elaria raised an eyebrow. "Or an attempt." Kayla spoke up. "We think they were close, but something happened. The tank. There was blood, like whatever they were experimenting on either escaped or was destroyed." "Either way," Jonas added, "they stopped just before they finished." Veyron closed the file slowly. "This confirms what many of us whispered, that humans were trying to reverse the curse, not through magic, through science." Elaria nodded, thoughtfully. "It makes sense. Your kind always seeks to understand what it cannot control, but it must have failed," Mira said. "There's no sign of success, just ruins." Veyron leaned back, expression unreadable. "Or perhaps," he said slowly, "someone didn't want it to succeed." A heavy silence followed. "Do you believe it's real?" Kayla asked. "That it could have worked?" Elaria's voice was calm, measured. "Hope is a dangerous thing, but yes, if they had time, knowledge, and the right blood, it could have been real." Mira looked at the file, then back at them. "Do you think there's a way to continue it?" Veyron glanced at her. A faint glimmer of curiosity sparked in his eyes. "Perhaps. But if there is, it will be deep beneath the ashes, and well guarded." Elaria placed a hand on Mira's shoulder. "Then we find this farmhouse, and we begin again." The crypt was tense with motion, bags packed, weapons checked, supplies rationed, and above them, the world was slipping into twilight once more. Mira stood near the edge of the makeshift table, double-checking what little gear they had. She looked toward Elaria, who stood calmly beside a lantern, arms folded in thought. "How far is this farmhouse, really?" Mira asked. Elaria tilted her head. "If we had a car, perhaps a month's drive." Jonas, sitting nearby with Kayla, scoffed. "There are no cars, no fuel. Half the roads are collapsed. Walking could take years, if the lichens don't kill us first." "Then it can't be done," Kayla muttered. Veyron, ever the silent listener, stepped out from the far side of the room. A smile crept across his pale face. Who said anything about walking? They all turned to him. We can get you there. In moments. Jonas frowned. What? Veyron stepped closer, the candlelight dancing in his eyes. You see, we travel by shadow, from one to the next, across great distances, as long as there is darkness to move through. At night, we can move faster than the eye can follow. It's how I've crossed continents, for we are not bound to earth or road. We are shadow. Kayla blinked. So, we can all go? Veyron shook his head. No, not all at once. We can carry one each with us. It is demanding. Takes a toll. The shadow bends around us, and we must protect you within it. Only 2 of you may go. One must stay behind. A hush settled over the room. And once we've arrived, Elaria added, we will need to secure the place and re-energize ourselves. The journey will drain much of our power. You mean feed? Mira said bluntly. How much? Elaria's expression didn't change. Too much. We will need rest before we return for the 3rd. I'll stay, Mira said without hesitation. Kayla turned to her. Are you sure? Mira nodded. I trust them. But if something goes wrong, we can't all disappear at once. Veyron's voice turned grim. We'll travel at night, which means they will be out. Lycans roam most freely in the dark, and once we're gone, this place will have no protection. I know, Mira replied, but I've been thinking about that. She turned, stepping toward a small metal case she'd been keeping near her supplies. I've been scavenging more than just food. I found some old survival gear, cleaning chemicals, even a few science kits from what used to be a school. She pulled out a few small bottles, clear liquid, dark brown vials, a cracked measuring spoon. I think I can mask my scent. Veyron raised an eyebrow. How? Mira smiled. Ammonia, vinegar, sulphur. It's not perfect, but layered right and kept fresh. It might confuse the lichens' noses. Their sense of smell is so refined they can pick us out by emotion, but if I can throw off the chemical markers, they might not track me. At least, not easily. Kayla stared at her. Where did you learn that? Mira gave a small shrug. My dad. He was a scientist, remember? He taught me more than I thought I remembered. It just took a while to come back. Even Veyron looked momentarily impressed. A clever trick, he said, and desperate enough to work. Elaria studied her with a rare flicker of admiration. You're shining, Mira. I see it now. Mira looked down at her small collection of bottles, her breath steady, her eyes burning with purpose. I'm tired of just surviving, she said. I want to start fighting back. Night had fully fallen. In silence deeper than death, Elaria and Veyron stood on opposite ends of the crypt, each with one hand placed gently on their chosen human, Kayla. Jonas, the shadows curled around their feet, rippling like ink across water. Whatever happens, Veyron said softly, don't resist, and don't open your eyes. Kayla inhaled sharply. What if I... But they were already gone. The crypt fell still, and the darkness moved. The journey. The world vanished. No air, no sound, no light. Only motion. Jonas felt like he was falling and standing still at the same time. Kayla clutched at nothing, as cold needles of wind tore past her skin and vanished into vapour. They didn't breathe. They didn't need to. Time wasn't passing, not normally. They weren't walking or running. They were slipping. across rooftops, under streets, through cracks in stone and shattered buildings, shadow to shadow, like whispers following a dying sun. The farmhouse. When their feet found earth again, it was frozen, a field of snow stretched in all directions, quiet and endless. At the centre stood a crumbling farmhouse, its roof partially caved in, windows broken, walls weather-beaten and greyed with time. The elders were panting. Elaria stumbled forward, blinking slowly. Her form wavered, then vanished into the house without a word. "Elaria!" Kayla called, but Veyron raised a hand. Moments later, the front door creaked open, and a thin, hidden panel inside slid back, a staircase leading downward. "Hurry," Elaria said, her voice raw. "We must rest." The bunker below. The space beneath the farmhouse, once part lab, part shelter. Metal walls insulated the cold, though the air was still and stale. The two elders collapsed onto makeshift chairs, their bodies flickering briefly between solid and shadow. Without words, they reached for Kayla and Jonas. Neither resisted. The feed-in was silent, not violent, just draining. Quick slashes, pressed hands, gasped breaths, eyes fluttering, a taking but not a breaking. When they finished, both elders leaned back, exhausted, pale even by their standards. "It is not enough," Veyron muttered. "It will do," Elaria whispered. "For now." "We must sleep. You'll watch?" Jonas nodded. "Of course." They fell still. Shadows gathered. The bunker was silent. Elsewhere, Mira. Above the crypt, Mira stood alone. The wind had changed. She'd just finished her third round of scent masking. Her formula was stronger now. Ammonia, sulfur, copper salts, layered perfectly with repellent bases to confuse olfactory tracking. But something felt wrong. She didn't hear them. She felt them. A deep, vibrating thrum in the ground. The breath of the predator before it howled. They were near. She didn't run, not yet. Instead, she sprinted to the upper level of the chapel, to a place she'd marked earlier. A rusted vent shaft, buried under rubble. She pulled it free, slid inside, and sprayed the opening behind her with a burst of her mixture, sealing it with salt and powder. Then she ran, through forgotten passageways, out broken side walls, into the forest behind the ruins. The chase. They followed. 4 lichens, massive, ravenous, drawn to the scent of life. But something was wrong. They couldn't track her. Her trail looped, reversed, doubled back. She'd laid false trails, used ash and heat patches to confuse body warmth, diverted water from a broken pipe to simulate movement. She even left behind strips of her own clothing, saturated in layered compounds, tucked into a rusted pipe that echoed her heartbeat, using a scavenged speaker coil. The lichens roared in frustration, and Mira, gone. Already 3 streets away, calm, focused, thinking. She returned to the crypt just before sunrise, tired, but untouched. She walked back inside, sealed the door, and breathed. And for a moment, in the mirror of a shattered pain, she didn't see a girl anymore. She saw something more. The day passed in silence. The wind moaned through the cracks of the ruined chapel, carrying with it the cold breath of winter and the distant howl of the world that no longer belonged to humans. Mira rested lightly, never fully asleep. Her body ached, but her mind never stopped working, tinkering, adjusting, preparing, just in case. If the elders didn't return, she'd last the night, maybe longer. But in her heart, she knew they would. As the sun sank once more beneath the blood-coloured sky, the shadows stretched long across the chapel floor. And then they moved. Without sound, without warning, Elaria appeared. Her presence was like the drop in temperature before a storm. She stepped through the fading light, her cloak trailing behind her like the midnight mist. "Are you ready, my dear?" she asked gently. Mira stood, already prepared, her scent-masking agents freshly layered, her small pack slung over one shoulder. "I'm ready." Elaria glanced around at the workbench Mira had created. Jars, vials, handwritten notes, a setup that looked more like a lab than a survivor's den. Her brow lifted, intrigued. "How did you come up with all this?" she asked, stepping forward, gently picking up one of the bottles. Mira shrugged. I don't know. It just sort of came to me, like I'd done it before, or someone had shown me once. Elaria smiled faintly. "You're something remarkable, Mira." Mira met her eyes but didn't respond. There was no pride in her expression, just purpose. Elaria turned towards the shadowed exit. "We need to leave." "I'm ready," Mira said again, her voice calm. "Sure." But just before stepping into the dark, Elaria paused. "Oh, by the way," she said casually, "you once mentioned your father. Said he was a scientist." Mira nodded. "Yes, a great one, before the world fell." Elaria turned, her expression unreadable. "What was his name?" Mira blinked. "Oh, you wouldn't know him," she said softly. "His name was Winter." Ilaria's smile faltered, just for a breath, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned back to the dark. "Come, child," she whispered. "The shadows wait." And together they vanished into them. End of part 3, to be continued.